My name's Shafakat Ali. I'm 38 years old. I live in Rochdale. I was born in Rochdale and I'm second generation Kashmiri. My father, before I was born, or when I was born I think, he used to be a foreman in the mills in the cotton industry. My mother was always a housewife. I think they came in the 70s. I'm assuming it was to do with the labour force, in terms of the UK needed a labour force. People were being shipped over from Pakistan, Kashmir, India, Bangladesh. It's not really a conversation that I've taken those snippets of information from. My assumption's always been that it's been in the 70s. The house was made out of, I don't know what you call it, I think it's sandblasted stone. Very traditional in terms of wooden windows, a wooden front door, 2 stories, 3 bedrooms, 2 reception rooms and a kitchen downstairs and a cellar. The street was called Milford Street and it was near the Rochdale Infirmary. We were number 1. A really nice, peaceful area at the time when I was a youngster. Next was a small alleyway, and next to that was St John's Ambulance Club, which then became JD Dance Club. There was a real community spirit. Neighbours used to get on with each other very well. It was a mixed culture. You had a lot of English folks, you had a lot of Pakistanis, you had some Kashmiris. It was neighbourly, people got on, very little in the way of crime, very little in the way of racism. It was a really nice place to be at that time as I was growing up. My father was in Kashmir looking after his mother because he was a single son, and there were 4 brothers, including myself, and 2 sisters in the house. My relationship with my sisters was very strong and still is strong, and with my brothers it was reasonable. It wasn't good, it wasn't bad, it was just day-to-day life. Getting up early, having porridge, going to school, my mum taking me to school till I was 10 years old, I think it was, where then I started to walk to school with my friends. Coming home again, having a quick bite to eat, watching BBC One or CITV or whatever it was in those days with Pat Sharp, Andy Peters, Ed the Duck, and then having about an hour's worth of a breather, so between 3:30, 4:30, 4:45, getting to the mosque, learning how to pray, reading Quran there. Mosque was very disciplined, because if you didn't, you'd get a smack and know about it as well. I mean, I was quite fortunate in terms of my ability to memorise, recite and progress in the enunciation of the Quran was actually very good. So, to me, to be honest with you, mosque was okay. I mean, I look back and I think it was a fantastic thing because it gave me my grounding in terms of for the little knowledge that I have now. But I think mosque for myself back then, it was almost, do I really have to go? Can I not just stay at home and watch some more cartoons or whatever it is like all the other friends of mine are doing? I remember from being 12 years old, Reader's Digest. Nobody knows what Reader's Digest is these days apart from me, because every day after the mosque, my mother would go to the library that we've got at home, pull out a book of Reader's Digest. She obviously can't read English, speak English. Open up 20 pages and say, that's what you're writing today. So I had lines to do when I was at home because it was assumed the more that I'd write, the better my mental faculty would be when I come to exams and so on. So all along from being a young kid, I remember my mum saying to me, your mummy's little boy, you're going to be the doctor of the family, you're going to be the doctor. And I was like, well, I don't really fancy being a doctor, to be honest with you. I'd rather be an astronomer. And, study the stars, study physics, look at the moon, study black holes, comets. And my mum's response was, well, why don't you just look out the window? You don't need to do that. Just be a doctor. I said, well, if I'm going to be a doctor, if that's what she really wants me to do, I'll be something which makes me satisfied as well. So I'll be a vet because I love animals. And my mum's response was, oh, that's great. I'll tell all my friends that my son is a doctor of pigs and dogs and cats. And I thought, okay, there goes veterinary out the window as well. So I studied hard. I got 10 GCSEs, A-levels. I got 4 A-levels. I got my degree. And that was in digital media, of all things, to be honest with you, multimedia. So the fact that my family was quite studious and it was impressed on me wasn't bad of an issue, because it then made me into a studious individual for the good rather than the opposite way around. My best friend at high school, Gareth Porter, we were best friends from primary school. He used to live on the street behind me. I used to go to his house, he used to come to my house. I used to have stopovers at his. He used to stop over at mine as well, actually. Birthday parties were never birthday parties if Gareth wasn't there. We used to go to McDonald's together. We used to go to the Lake District together. And I remember once my mum saying that in our backyard we were playing with some wrestling toys. And we used to have a high gate. Well, it was high for us. It's about 5.5 feet right now in height. And we were both eating. So my mum made some chapati, some roti, and we were both eating. And his father just came to kind of have a look to see if Gareth, his son's okay. And he heard us talking. So he came over to the back gate and he kind of spread his arms across the gate and put his chin on his hands. And he was just watching us for 5 minutes, just talking nonsense and pretending to be wrestlers and so on. And he saw my mum, he waved at my mum through the window and he went back home again. So we were quite close, we were best friends, Gareth and I. So he'd knock on for me. We'd walk towards something which is called Cronkeshaw Common. And that was only 2 minutes away from my house. It was a relatively large green field. Across the road from the common would be another school, a special needs school called Brown Hill. And that was a bit of do or die every morning because you had some special needs students with anger management problems as well. So if you were relatively unlucky, you'd have a few snooker balls flying at you as you're trying to walk into what's regarded as Fairlinge Park. Or you'd have a couple of their students chase you, trying to beat you up or hit you over the head with snooker cues, so to say. So every day I remember was relatively special in that you'd kind of count your blessings if you got across that patch of land, then onward into school. So once you've cleared Brown Hill, you have a relatively large park called Fairlinge Park. And again, it's quite nice. There were swings, there was a slide, there was a recreation area, there was a bandstand, there was some type of aquarium there as well, I seem to recall. And there was a pond with ducks and fish. So that was a nice walk. I remember in the autumn time, I think it was, trying to collect conkers every season there as well. And then, after about a 4 or 5 minute walk through the park, you'd come to the exit, and just across the road then would be our school. And we'd replay that journey every single day from the age of 11 to 16. My first language was English because my brothers and sisters were speaking English. Bahari was only ever spoken with my mum, and the rest of the time we all spoke English amongst ourselves. But in terms of my exposure, it was really only the basics because nursery it was English, school it was English, even in mosque it was English between myself and whoever else was there. And my friends, it was English, competitions, PE, TV, radio, everything was English. So that's what I became accustomed to. And even now, my language use of Mirpuri, for example, I can understand perhaps 90%, but my ability to express myself is probably restricted to 65%, 70%. So I can get by, but knowing full well that my vocabulary isn't there, nor is exactly my grammatical ability as well. So I might say the wrong things in the wrong place, so to say. I think high school was the best time at that stage of my life because every morning I'd have 30 classmates. Going to different classes, you'd have 30 more classmates and so on. School dinners, the teachers were great. And I think that's where you generally begin to define yourself or understand a little bit about yourself as an individual as to who you are. So I did quite well in terms of I was in the top sets. I'd have to quote unquote report back to my brother because he was the father figure in the house. So he'd always be the one who checks up on your results and your attendance and so on. I don't think he ever went to any of my parents' evenings. It was either my brother or sister. They took an interest, but only so much as to what was required and nothing beyond it. I don't think at that stage I had much of an outside life, outside school and mosque, for example, only because the thing to do was read some books, talk with the family, go to maybe 1 or 2 friends or maybe the neighbour's home, watch TV. So I don't think there was much of an outside life back then. But even in high school, particularly, I realised that home life and school life, I wasn't a different individual, but I was able to develop more and express myself in different ways in school rather than the day-to-day confines of being within the home. I think it was something that I was understanding about myself, learning about myself, growing as an individual, as a personality about myself as well. So I think they were completely different in some respects, and I think that only continued as life went on.